When is the last time that you were really angry? For me, it was yesterday driving in Houston traffic. But for you, I'm not sure what it could be, but I'm not talking just kind of angry. I'm talking about really angry, rageful. What is the last time that you felt that sort of emotion? This Lenten season, we're going to examine the Psalms and connect emotions to them. And the one that we're talking about today is anger. Anger is often one in Christianity that we try to avoid, maybe try to put some makeup over or hide in the closet or something like that. But it's a real emotion that we experience often, sometimes daily. So we want to talk about that today. Okay, so let's jump into it. So we are in Psalm 137. And Kira, do you want to explain a little bit about the context of our psalm?
Yeah, so this is a psalm that is it's set in exile, and the people of Israel are sitting by the rivers of Babylon. And the people who are now ruling over them are mocking them and trying to get them to sing. And it's like the worship leaders of Israel, rather than leading worship in the temple where they would have normally done it, now they're being kind of asked to perform as if they're kind of the entertainment for the night.
Gotcha.
So there's this injustice to what is happening. They're being mocked. There's a lot of pain and lament in that. And so then Israel responds with, like, how could we possibly sing those types of songs here in this foreign place? And they get really worked up about that. And so then it ends with them saying, I'm never going to forget where I came from, and I hope that what has happened to me happens to you. And they're speaking to their captives, or their captors. And the thing that they wish upon them, the way that the psalm ends, is, happy shall they be who take your little ones and dash them against the rock.
Yeah.
So a very violent
You can see why they cut it out. You can see why,
Yes.
parentheses are on this one.
But when I was doing some research on this psalm, part of why that image, I think, comes up is this would have been something that they had experienced when they were taken into captivity. They would have seen their own children dashed. And it's also a prophecy of what is going to happen to Babylon. So there's this past reference of this has happened to us, and also this is going to happen to them.
For sure. So let's add a little bit of color and texture to this. So you said exile. So the exile came upon Jerusalem, came upon the nation of Israel in 500 BC, 500 years before Christ or so. And what happened was the Babylonian Empire came in and completely ransacked their country, and then basically took them as slaves into their own country. And so is a very violent, just the worst thing you can imagine happening to your homeland, to your people.
Yeah, and we're so, that is such an abstract thing for most of us to think about, which I'm grateful for. But the kind of grit and violence of that and the trauma that continues on through the psalm.
Absolutely. So that adds kind of a texture. It's not, this person wasn't stuck on Westheimer, just kind of grumpy that they were in traffic.
Right.
This is probably the most severe type of hardship that I can imagine happening. And so this is their response.
They're refusing to sing a song of praise from their old life. They're saying, I'm not going to be able to return to that. So there's a lament of, my old life is destroyed.
That's right. And I think another thing about this too is these songs were sung to God. They were a worship song, almost like a hymn in a way. And we were talking before the show. This is reminiscent of Paul's words: "Be angry and do not sin."
Right.
It's a way of expressing anger in a way that wraps it up in worship in a way, but doesn't soften it at all.
Right.
These are raw emotions. These are intense words, and yet they're packaged in worship and given to God plainly and unfiltered and unpolished.
Yeah, I think, if you think about when you're angry, what are you looking for in that moment? And it's all of this pressure that is building up, and you're looking for release, I think, and direction and vocabulary. If you think of, when you're like spitting angry, and part of what is so frustrating is that there aren't words to describe how mad you are. And so we just resort to swearing usually.
Yeah.
But this is taking all of that, giving it language and giving it direction and passing it over to God. And there's something really good about doing that. It also shows us that rather than trying to hide how we're feeling from God in our prayer life or in our worship, there is that space for it.
Yeah, there's a license even.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And I think often people think of, Christianity as a place where I've got to have it all together. I've got to make sure I'm buttoned up before I walk into the church. And sometimes it can feel that way. But what the scriptures are telling us is that God wants all of you. God wants you when you're buttoned up, but also when you're angry.
Yeah.
And you have no other words that you can describe your emotions. Also when you're sad and when you're lonely, God wants all of you. And that's a beautiful gift. And I think we're seeing that in this psalm of God is giving us permission to be angry and to give that anger to God.
Yeah. And there are 150 psalms, other examples of psalms where it's not just anger that is happening, but it's anger against God himself. And that is allowed too.
Yeah.
It's not a faith where you're not allowed to be angry with God. It's a faith that invites you to have that real relationship, no matter how messy it is. And that is such a gift. I don't think we realize that, or we give ourselves permission for that often. But, God knows what you're thinking already. So if you're mad at him, he already knows. You might as well tell him.
Yeah. And that's what God wants from us too. God wants all of us, our hearts, our souls, our angers, because God desires to be in relationship with us.
Yeah. I remember being in a very difficult season and telling someone, they were asking about my prayer life, and I said, well, I'm giving God the silent treatment right now. And I was telling two friends, and one of them was like, well, that makes sense. And the other one said, no, don't do that. And then we prayed together, and part of the gift was that they were able to give words to how I was feeling, and that's what the Psalms do for us, I think.
I think a key takeaway is that God can handle our anger. God can handle whatever emotion we throw at God.
Even the most ugly statement. I think this is one of the ugliest statements.
Yeah. Oh, this is the most vile thing you could say.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if this is just the worst thing you could say.
And so happy shall they be who take your little ones and dash them against the rock. And the reason that the psalm can end that way is it's naming Babylon as the devastator, and happy shall they be who pay you back what you have done to us. So it's referring back to, this has happened to us, and now I wish this upon you.
For sure.
My worst enemy, I wish this upon you.
For sure. And, this is a psalm that people have interpreted for thousands of years at this point. And one interpretation that I really like is by C.S. Lewis. And he interprets the rock as Christ, as the one who is our firm foundation, who's the rock that we get to hide in.
Right.
And so I think that kind of turns this into God taking all of our anger and redeeming whatever has happened to us, redeeming the injustices that have been done to us. And Christ is the one who ultimately redeems all of that.
Right. He takes on the injustice himself on the cross, but also he takes on the act and role of being the judge. So I'm not the one who is going to dash my enemy's children against the rocks. Jesus Christ is the rock who has absorbed that retribution and takes on the role of judge. So when I pray this psalm, part of what I'm doing is saying, I don't know how to carry out the judgment that needs to happen. I actually can't do that. It's not my position. I'm just a creature. You are the creator. You are the judge. And I need you as Lord to take this on for me. I can't do it. And so this is us passing on that judgment to Jesus, who both takes on the judgment and does the judging. So he's absorbing all of that for us.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. And that's how God can handle our anger.
Because of the cross.
Because
and
of the cross.
Of Jesus.
Yeah. That's where Jesus becomes both the little one and the rock.
Right.
Becomes the one who takes our redemption.
Yeah.
Or takes all of our anger, takes everything and turns it into redemption and brings salvation. Yeah. And that's the good news about Christianity, is that we can be angry, but it's not lost. Yeah. It's not all over at that point. And God can handle that anger and bring transformation. And part of the reason that we're even talking about this at all is that we want to give license to being human, that you can be angry, that you can be upset, you can feel lonely, you're allowed to feel these things. But Christianity gives you a pathway. Right. And the Psalms give you language to feel these things and to give them to God. Because really it's all about being in relationship with God and with each other.
Yeah. So even though the Psalm ends in such a disastrous way, that's not the end of the story. And so whatever you're feeling, you can bring that before God and know that there is more to come from that. We don't end with the destruction. We end with resurrection.
Yeah. And this isn't the last psalm.
No.
It's not the first psalm. And it's very interesting where it's situated. It's between the steadfast love of the Lord endures forever. It repeats that over and over and over again. And then I give thanks to God with my whole heart. And, it's the whole scope of the human experience in these psalms. Yeah. Okay, well, we're excited for this new season in Lent and to talk about the Psalms, the way they express our emotions. So we look forward to joining you next week.
Thank you.